The moment the warning lights flickered, he knew something was wrong. It was February 25th, 1944, just after noon, and the sky over central Germany looked calm in a way that made pilots uneasy. Second Lieutenant John "Jack" Morgan, barely 3 weeks into combat duty, was flying a brand new P-51 Mustang with the 357th Fighter Group, escorting B-17 bombers toward Regensburg. He was 22 years old, fresh from England, and this was only his 5th mission. No medals, no kills, no reputation, just speed, fuel, and instinct. Then his radio crackled with urgent calls he wasn't supposed to hear, German fighter control, bleeding through the static, and a phrase that would later show up in Allied intelligence reports. Abort, abort, he's too fast. Minutes earlier, Morgan had drifted slightly high and wide while checking his engine gauges. The Merlin engine felt strong, the air thin and cold at 26,000 feet. He didn't know yet that his small mistake had made him visible. Below him, near the cloud tops, 9 Focke-Wulf FW-190s from Jägerschwader 26 were climbing hard. They had been vectored toward a lone Mustang that looked separated, inexperienced, and easy. German pilots loved moments like this. A single escort fighter far from the bomber box meant a quick kill and an easy return home. That was the plan. It collapsed in less than 4 minutes. The first sign came as dark shapes rising fast from his left rear quarter. Morgan reacted late, then too fast, shoving the throttle forward and dropping the nose. The Mustang surged ahead like it had been kicked. The P-51 wasn't just another fighter. By early 1944, pilots were learning what the Germans feared most. It could dive faster, hold energy longer, and run farther than anything the Luftwaffe had left. Morgan didn't think about tactics or manuals. He thought about distance. He rolled, inverted, and dove. The German leader called the chase. They followed him down, engines screaming, propellers biting air. At first, they closed the gap. Morgan felt the pressure in his chest as the altimeter unwound. His airspeed needle climbed past 420 miles per hour. The Mustang vibrated, but stayed true. Tracers flashed past his canopy, close enough to hear. He held the dive longer than training said was safe. At 18,000 feet, he leveled out and pushed again. The Merlin responded. The FW-190s began to fall back. This was the moment German radio traffic turned frantic. The intercept had failed. Their closure rate was gone. One pilot reported compressibility. Another warned about fuel. The leader ordered them to break off. Allied monitoring stations later translated the transmission that stuck in memory. Abort, abort. He's too fast. For a rookie who had never fired his guns in combat, it was the most dangerous compliment he could receive. Morgan didn't know he was being chased by 9 aircraft. He only knew the sky behind him felt crowded. He stayed low, skimming broken cloud, heading west toward friendly lines. His fuel gauge dipped lower than he liked. The Mustang's range was legendary, but high-speed escape burned fuel fast. He eased the throttle just enough to stay ahead without killing the engine. Every few seconds, he checked behind him. One FW-190 tried again, diving steeply to regain speed. Morgan waited, then pulled up sharply, bleeding the German of energy. It worked. The fighter dropped away. By the time Morgan crossed the Rhine, his hands were shaking. The radio came alive again, this time in English. His flight leader had been calling him for nearly 10 minutes. Morgan answered with a simple acknowledgement and rejoined near the Dutch border. No cheers, no celebration, just quiet relief. Back at RAF Leiston in England, intelligence officers pulled him aside. They had questions. They showed him a transcript of German radio chatter intercepted during the mission. He read the words slowly, not fully understanding why everyone was staring at him. Abort. Abort. He's too fast. The story spread anyway, not as a legend, but as a lesson. The Mustang had changed the air war, and even rookies could survive if they trusted its strengths. For the Luftwaffe, it was another sign of something worse. If their experienced pilots were gone, fuel was short, and now even inexperienced Americans could outrun them. For Morgan, it was the day he stopped being new. He flew 17 more missions before his first aerial victory. He would always say that his most important fight was the one where he didn't fire a single shot. What happened over Germany that day wasn't about luck alone. It was timing, technology, and a young pilot learning fast in the most unforgiving classroom on earth. And somewhere in a German operations room, officers marked the engagement down as another failed intercept, another aircraft that got away. They never knew the name of the man in that Mustang. They only knew the speed. The mission of February 25th, 1944, did not end when John Morgan shut down his engine on the wet concrete at RAF Liston. In many ways, that was when the real weight of what had happened finally settled in. The ground crew saw the oil streaks along the fuselage and the heat shimmer still rising from the exhaust stacks. They asked him what he ran into. Morgan only shrugged. He said he went fast and didn't stop. That answer sounded simple, but it carried a truth every pilot in the 8th Air Force was learning the hard way. Speed was survival now. That winter marked a turning point in the air war over Europe. The US Army Air Forces had lost thousands of men in daylight bombing raids before the Mustang arrived in numbers. Before that, German fighters waited patiently at the edges of escort range. They attacked when the Thunderbolts and Lightnings had to turn back. The bombers flew on alone. Crews called it the Long Walk. By early 1944, that gap was closing. The P-51 could stay with the bombers to the target and back, and more importantly, it could chase the enemy all the way home. German pilots knew it. They felt it in every engagement. Morgan's encounter with the 9 FW-190s was not unusual in shape, but it was brutal in meaning. Jagdgeschwader units were under constant pressure. Fuel allocations had been cut. Training hours were slashed. Many of the pilots climbing to intercept that day had less flight time than Morgan himself. The difference was that they were expected to fight veterans in machines that could outpace them. When the German controller ordered the abort, it wasn't just about one Mustang. It was an admission that the rules had changed. Over the next weeks, Morgan listened more than he talked. In the briefing room, pilots dissected fights with pencils and maps. They talked about energy, about never turning with a FW-190, about trusting the dive. Morgan realized how close he had come to dying simply because he didn't know the sky yet. He also realized something else. The Mustang forgave mistakes if you respected it. That confidence grew quietly. On March 6, 1944, the 8th Air Force returned to Germany in force. Berlin was the target. It was one of the largest daylight raids of the war so far. Morgan flew as a wingman again, this time staying glued to his leader. The Luftwaffe rose to meet them, just as it always did. The sky over the capital filled with contrails and flak bursts. This time, Morgan fired his guns. He didn't score a kill, but he didn't panic either. When a Messerschmitt crossed his nose, he tracked it smoothly, just like in training. When fuel ran low, and he turned for home without hesitation. The lessons from that first chase stayed with him. German radio traffic during March became darker in tone. Allied intelligence noticed the change. There were fewer confident calls, fewer organized mass attacks. Instead, there were short bursts of warning, scattered reports of Mustangs everywhere, and constant concern about fuel and engine limits. Pilots were being told not to chase too far, not to dive too long, not to engage alone, but the sky didn't allow for careful plans anymore. On April 11, 1944, Morgan finally got his first confirmed victory. It happened near Kassel, late in the escort, when a lone FW-190 tried to slip through the formation. Morgan followed the rules this time. He stayed high, rolled in with speed, fired a short burst, and pulled away. The German fighter went down smoking. There was no thrill in his voice when he reported it, just a calm statement of fact. The chase from February had already taken the excitement out of combat. He understood now that survival came first. For the Luftwaffe, April and May were months of steady loss. The defence of the Reich was bleeding pilots faster than they could replace them. Veterans were forced to fly every day. Rookies were thrown into combat with barely enough hours to land safely. The FW-190 was still a powerful aircraft, especially at low altitude, but it could not dictate the fight anymore. The Mustang could choose when to engage and when to leave. That freedom was deadly. Morgan's squadron began flying offensive sweeps ahead of the bombers. These missions were designed to draw German fighters up early and destroy them before they reached the bomber stream. They were dangerous and exhausting. There was no neat formation, no predictable enemy approach. Pilots hunted in pairs, eyes scanning constantly. Any mistake could be fatal. Morgan lost friends during these weeks. Men he had eaten breakfast with didn't come back. Their empty chairs stayed that way. Each loss hardened the remaining pilots. They flew tighter, they talked less. The jokes in the mess hall grew quieter. Morgan wrote letters home that sounded optimistic, but he avoided details. He knew how quickly things could end. He also knew he was no longer the rookie who had stumbled into danger by accident. Now he recognized it from miles away. By June 1944, the invasion of Normandy was underway. The air war shifted again. Escort missions gave way to ground attack, armed reconnaissance, and low-level strikes against rail yards and convoys. These were brutal flights. Flak was thick and accurate. German fighters were fewer but still dangerous. Morgan flew 2 missions on June 6th, supporting troops pushing inland from the beaches. The sky was crowded with Allied aircraft. For the first time, air superiority felt real. Yet even then, moments of terror returned without warning. On June 9th, near Caen, Morgan was bounced by a pair of German fighters coming out of the sun. He broke hard, felt the airframe groan, and dove. Once again, speed saved him. The Mustang ran, just like it had in February. This time, there was no confusion, no hesitation. He trusted the machine and his judgment. The Germans broke off sooner than expected. When the war ended in May 1945, Morgan had completed more than 60 combat missions, and he survived crashes, engine failures, and near misses that never made it into reports. The February chase remained the story people asked him about most, not because it was his greatest victory, but because it captured something true about the air war's turning point. A young pilot still learning could survive against overwhelming odds because the balance had shifted. German post-war interviews confirmed what Allied intelligence had suspected. By early 1944, morale among fighter units was collapsing. Pilots spoke of Mustangs as shadows that followed them everywhere. They complained about orders to engage, despite impossible odds. One former FW-190 pilot described chasing a Mustang and watching it simply pull away, no matter what he did. He said that was the moment he realized the war was lost in the air, and Morgan never claimed hero status. After the war, he returned to civilian life quietly. He flew occasionally, but nothing compared to those days over Europe. When asked about that first escape, he said the same thing every time. He said he made mistakes, and the airplane saved him. He said speed gave him a second chance. And he said the radio call he never heard meant more to the enemy than it did to him. Abort, abort. He's too fast was not a shout of fear. It was a statement of fact. In the cold skies of 1944, facts decided who lived and who didn't. The P-51 Mustang changed those facts, one chase at a time. And for one young rookie pilot, it turned a near-fatal error into the beginning of survival. The sky that day over Germany looked calm. It always did. That was the last lie before everything tried to kill you. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.